Good afternoon. As Brittany said, thank you so much. I'm a partner here at Tully Rinckey, and I do concentrate most of my practice on family and matrimonial issues. And this is really a guide for people who are thinking about getting divorced, who, a lot of people contact me and they are not sure if they want to get divorced, but they want to know what they should do in anticipation of getting divorced to prepare. And that's really what this webinar is for. And you can do a lot of things in advance while you're thinking about getting divorced and sort of, prepare yourself while you have the idea and while you're considering getting divorced. So there are a lot of things that you can do before you make that final jump. And this is really, the foundation so that when you do decide to make the jump to get divorced, you have all of your ducks in a row and you're ready to go, so that when you call your lawyer, you don't have to really wait around. So the things that we're going to discuss today, we're going to go through legal jargon so that when you contact your lawyer, you're familiar with the words that your lawyer is going to use. And we're going to discuss finding the right lawyer for you, because there are a lot of attorneys out there and not every lawyer is right for every person. It's like a dating game and you have to find the right person for you. And then there's important questions that you need to ask your lawyer or even ask somebody during a consultation. And then there are very important things that I personally think that you should do before you even talk about getting divorced. And then, of course, your lawyer is going to ask you for very specific documents. And it's really a good idea for you to get those documents ahead of time. Sometimes those documents tend to disappear. Sometimes those documents are unavailable, and it can take a while to get those. So if you can start acquiring them ahead of time, that can be a good idea. So we're going to talk about the documents required, financial, personal, and then we're going to go into some other issues, what happens to real estate and social media. There are a lot of other issues that we can talk about, but that's where we're headed today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the legal jargon, or what you're going to hear from your lawyer. So when you start speaking to a lawyer, they're going to start throwing around a lot of terms at you. They don't mean to talk in legal terms, but that's the way we do talk, and that's what happens. And New York, about 10 years ago, adopted something called the no-fault divorce, which means you don't have to have a reason to get, a reason to get divorced or grounds. And that simply means you can get divorced by irretrievable, broken down marriage for 6 months. And this is what New York considers the no-fault divorce. And your lawyer is going to start saying things to you like contested divorce, uncontested divorce. Do you want to do a collaborative divorce? Do you want to do mediation? And all of these things are what you need to think about in advance. So when your lawyer talks to you about it, mediation, that's not something that you would do with your lawyer. You would do that with a mediator. And that is not something we're going to discuss today, but that's where you and your spouse go and deal with the mediator, and then you come back to your lawyer to draft the separation agreement. So an uncontested divorce really means that you and your spouse agree to everything, and you agree on all the issues, and you draft a separation agreement, and you file that separation agreement with the court, and you get divorced that way. So that's what an uncontested divorce means, that everybody agrees on all of the terms, and you file, you always have to have a separation agreement, and that's what an uncontested divorce means. It's not contested, it's agreed. A contested divorce means that the parties, at least in the beginning, are not on the same page and they don't agree to the terms. Maybe they're disagreeing about how custody is going to be worked out, or they don't agree on how they want to sell their house. That means that it's contested. And a lot of times a contested divorce must go to court, and the judge will kind of ask you to see if you can work it out before you go to trial. The idea is always not to go to trial because you don't want a third person telling you how to live your life. And that's really what happens when you have a contested divorce and go to trial. And most contested divorces wind up settling with a settlement agreement and becoming uncontested. The next thing is the mediation, where you meet with a mediator, and they help you come to an agreement. The parties still require going to attorneys to review the agreement, draft a settlement agreement, and file documents with the court. It's very important to understand that the settlement agreement does not get you divorced. It never does, and it never will. And that you still have to file all the documents with the court. The next thing some lawyers may talk to you about is collaborative divorce. This is something very interesting. It means that you and your spouse agree to use, both of you, collaborative attorneys, and you agree not to fight it out, and you agree to work with a therapist and a financial person, and it is a different type of divorce that's with a different type of attorney. Attorneys are also going to say words like equitable distribution, marital versus separate property. They're going to talk about custody determinations and the best interests of the child, child support, and spousal support, which in New York is alimony. A lot of people don't realize that New York doesn't use the word alimony. It's maintenance or spousal support in New York. So each one of those could have its own webinar, and I think we could go on for hours about each one. I'll just explain. Equitable distribution is how the marital property is distributed in New York, which is usually 50-50. And marital versus separate property is anything, I can't make a generalization, but most likely if it was yours before you got married, it's yours after, and if not always, but things that were acquired during the marriage are usually marital property. Not always, can't make a generalization. So the next thing we're going to talk about is finding the right attorney for you. And this is very personal for a lot of people, because not every attorney is going to be right for every person. So a lot of people will say, I want a bulldog attorney. I want somebody who's going to go after, my spouse and really, get them at the throat. And that's great for some people, and it's not good for other people, because if you work with that kind of person and who's very, very adversarial, that can work. It definitely can. I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but sometimes when you work with somebody who's so adversarial in their approach, it creates cases that are so high conflict that the attorneys become in conflict with each other, and it becomes just legal fees. And you want an attorney that, instead of constantly filing motions and more motions and going to court, sometimes you want to find an attorney who's going to facilitate a settlement for you. And it's not always the appropriate way, for people to file motions after motions. A lot of people do think that they want somebody who's going to be, really adversarial and going to court and filing things constantly. But you have to remember, every time you pick up the phone and ask your lawyer to file a motion, that costs money. And it can get very expensive. So you really need to step back and think about what it is that you want, not just right in this minute, but at the very end. And it's the very end that you need to consider. What do you want for your children? What do you want for yourself? Do you want this, to be very high conflict because your children are going to see what's going on? You may think that they don't, but they always do. And at the end, even if you don't like each other, you're still parents to the same children. And the important thing is that you work together to parent your children. And that's what you have to remember when all is said and done. So I think, it's not just about finding somebody who's going to get you the best deal, because the law is the law, and we follow a certain formula to work on spousal maintenance. And there's a very specific formula for calculating child support. And all of that is done a little bit by negotiation, some of it by negotiation. And the attorneys have to follow the book some of the way. But for the most part, it is done by calculations. So it's important that you get along with your attorney in a fundamental way, and also that you feel comfortable working with that attorney. So, when you have your initial consultation, it's really important that you ask your attorney questions. The attorney is going to try and get information from you because that's the point of a consultation, but you're also interviewing an attorney. And it is very important that you find out what type of attorney you're interviewing. Are they high conflict? Do they believe in filing in court immediately? Do they understand what it is to do a separation agreement to start with? Are they going to, are they looking to help you facilitate a custody agreement? If you have issues with domestic violence, do they understand those issues? If you have an international issue, they must know what they're doing regarding international issues and getting those issues taken care of. It's very important that you ask the appropriate questions so that you can make sure that the attorney that you're dealing with can handle the case that you have. If you want to do a mediation, you can't go to an attorney that doesn't do mediation. But if you always need to have an attorney help you, even if you decide to do mediation, and if you want an attorney, if you decide in the beginning you really want to try to settle your case, then you really can't be working with an attorney who is, looking to go to court and try every case in court. And that's a very big difference. And you really need to find that out before you hire anybody. And I think that there are definite questions. So there's really important questions that you need to ask the attorney before you before you, jump in. And they need to be very specific to your needs, not just a general need, but to your needs. And it's very, I think that you're interviewing the attorney just as much as the attorney wants to find out about your case. You need to prioritize your needs, especially if you have children. You want to find out what how they handle custody agreements. Do they believe in going to family court first? If there are issues with domestic violence, will they help you get an order of protection? What are the issues that they can help you work on? So that's the importance of working with an attorney. The other thing is, a lot of people will try to get divorced on their own, or they'll try to handle parts of their case on their own. And of course, everybody's welcome to try to, go to court and get their cases handled on their own. A lot of times we see that people have gone and gotten a separation agreement, and it literally only gets them divorced, and they still need help dealing with the custody and the child support and the financial issues. So you've spent all of this money just getting divorced, but it hasn't taken care of any of the issues of your marriage. So that is a really important issue to talk about, because you need to understand what it is exactly that you're getting when you get an attorney. Are you getting divorced? Are you having all of the issues in your marriage taken care of? Are you getting the custody taken care of? What are you getting for your money? So it's just a very important thing that you read your retainer very carefully, and that you know exactly what it is that you're signing up for. Before you think about getting divorced, I think the most important thing that you can do first is to set up a dedicated email that you use just for you and your attorney. Maybe you use it for something else, but getting a new email that nobody else knows about can be extremely important. And I'm not saying that you can't trust your spouse or that people hack into your email, but I think it is extremely important that you protect yourself and you protect your privacy. And just to be on the safe side from everything, to set up a completely new email address. It's just from my experience that will help you in the future. And the next thing would be to have a credit report. Everybody's entitled to one credit report per year from all 3 credit bureaus. And this is important to make sure that nobody has opened up any accounts in your name. You want to make sure before you step into finding out about your assets and debts, that you actually want to know what is in your name, so that you can make sure maybe a spouse or somebody has not actually opened up credit cards in your name. So if hypothetically there is extra debt in your name, you want to know where it came from and how it got there, so that you can deal with it ahead of time. And it's a good idea to put a lock on your credit so that nobody can open up anything going forward in your name, and you keep an eye on it. The next thing would be to make sure that you have at least one credit card in your own name, either to establish credit on your own, because going forward, if you are going to be on your own, living on your own, and you don't have a credit card in your own name, it is very important to have and start to establish your own credit. And it may come to the point where you don't have any money, or you might be left with a bank account that's frozen. And of course, we try to avoid that, but it is very important for you to start to establish your own credit. And the same thing would be with a bank account. I'm not at all saying to go and hide money, but it would be very important to open up a bank account with a minimal amount of money, the smallest that you possibly can, to establish that you have credit in your own name. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to many people who already have bank accounts and credit cards in their name. But if you don't, then, I'm not, of course, not saying to do anything illegal of hiding money. Everybody can see that you have a small, checking account in your name, just to make sure that there's a separate account that you can put some money into. And the next thing that I would look into would be health insurance. When you go through a divorce, if you're getting health insurance through your spouse's company, your health insurance will end when you enter into the separation agreement. The separation agreement advises you that when the judgment of divorce is entered, you then have 36 months that you can pay for COBRA, which is you pay out of pocket to stay on your spouse's company health insurance, which sounds wonderful. COBRA can be very expensive. That said, it's a good idea to look into what other options you may have to get health insurance, whether it means getting a job where you can get some health insurance, or whether you get it through the marketplace, or however you get it. I'm not saying that you need to do it right away. It's just something, these are things to look into ahead of time. These are steps that you can take, preventative steps. And then the other thing, when you split, obviously all types of insurance, not just health insurance, your house insurance, car insurance, everything gets split. So you want to make sure that you look into getting house insurance if you are going to be getting your own house, as well as looking into getting your own car insurance. So again, not saying to get it right away, but just looking into what it would be to get your own car insurance and making sure that you will be able to get your own car insurance. So these are just steps, that preventative steps, things that you can do while you're thinking about getting divorced, while you have the time ahead of time, so that you can protect yourself and put yourself in a better position. And when you do call your attorney, we can go to the next slide. When you do call your attorney, they're going to ask you for a lot of information. And it's always a good idea to start gathering that information ahead of time. There's a lot of financial information that we require in order to prepare a separation agreement. And we will ask you to fill out a document called a statement of net worth. And this document requires a lot of financial information. And the more you can get ahead of time, the better place you are. So if you know what's going on in your own marriage, if in your own information, the better it is. So if you keep track a little bit, or not a little bit, if you're not the one who's paying the bills, or if you are not totally familiar with your assets and debts, it's a good idea to try to get copies of the bills. Again, if you're paying the bills, then it doesn't matter. But if you're not the one who's paying the bills, it's a great idea to start tracking. What are we paying for electricity? What are we paying for gas? How much does it cost every month to run the house? What are our tax bills? You want to start collecting that information and get a copy of the last year's, tax returns, the past 3 years. You've probably signed those tax returns and you can get copies of them. Call the accountant, say you need the copies of the tax returns. If they're not in your house files, contact an accountant and get those copies. If you can't access the statements online, contact the companies and set up your own account. If they are joint accounts, you have every right to access the accounts online. You want to make a list of whatever passwords you have to make sure that you know what accounts you have, which are yours, which are somebody else's. And you want to know exactly where all the money is, where it's going. As we say, all your assets, all your liabilities. This is so that we'll be able to calculate the marital estate. We will have to figure out child support, maintenance, and that's why we need all of this financial information. So it can become very, very important when we ask you for this information. People start to say, why do you need all my personal information? Well, we're trying to separate the marital estate. So that's why we start asking you for all of this information. And we will ask you to give us, if you have a 401k, we want your 401k. If you have retirement accounts, pension statements, you want to look at things like that. But the most important thing you want to try to start with are the tax returns. And it can be very important to try to get those. And it can take a long time to collect all these documents. So if you start to do it ahead of time, you're a little bit ahead of the curve. And the other thing, and this was a problem for me, was that the information just disappeared when I tried to access it. And that can be a big problem, is that once you announce you want to get divorced, somehow all of the information and all of the documents that you start looking for are gone. So it can be an even better idea that if you are going to make copies of the documents, make copies of them, put them back, and get those copies out of the house. Put them at a friend's house, scan them, don't keep them on your phone, put them somewhere that you have access to, but can't be found. It's just to make it safe for yourself, and so that they cannot be, destroyed or made it difficult for you to obtain. I'm not saying everybody is like that, but there are some people that can make things very difficult. And again, it was just my experience that my documents just seemed to disappear into thin air when I was looking for them. So you're looking for income statements, bank records, investment income, and retirement income. Those are the financial documents that you would be looking for. And then there are personal documents that you would want to make sure that you have on hand. These are not, the next slide, Brittany. These are not at all necessary, but you might want to make sure that you have these in a safe place. Sometimes these can disappear as well. So the most important ones that we would need, though, is if you have a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement. Those the attorney would need to see immediately. But if you do know where your Social Security cards are, your birth certificates, your passports, those are things you might want to secure in a different location for the time being. And you also want to make sure that you have your children's documents in a very secure location as well. So one of the questions that I get frequently when I speak to people who are thinking about getting divorced is about what they want to do in the future. Where do they want to live? What happens to their house? And that tends to be a very big question. So sometimes I'll be at a party and be like, so and so got to keep their house. Why did they keep their house, but I didn't get to keep my house? And that is always a very, very big problem when I hear it. Somebody's divorce over here is not the same as somebody's over here. And you, before you start out, need to remember that no two separations or divorces are the same. And what happens with your friend is not going to be the same as what happens with you. And nobody really tells you what goes on when they get divorced, ever. And they're never going to share the details of what they had to possibly give up to keep a house, or what somebody did to help them keep a house. So if somebody has kept a house in a divorce, it's never as it seems. So that's the first thing. There are many ways that people keep their house, and I just wanted to discuss how this works, because this is one of the major questions that I get. And Brittany, if you go to the next, what happens with real estate, and the documents that you need when you for your house. So you definitely want to get the most current mortgage statement that you have. And you can call your mortgage company and get a payoff statement and find out, that's to see exactly how much money you still owe on the mortgage and what it would take if you were to pay off the mortgage today, how much it would take to pay off the mortgage. And you can have a broker come to the house and give you don't need a real appraisal. You can go on Zillow, see what your house is worth. You can have a broker come to the house and give you, they call them comps, and say, this house down the street sold for that. This is what we think your house is worth. And this is all information. It's all information what goes into before you get divorced. And a lot of this is just knowledge, and knowledge is power. And the more you have, the better situated you'll be. So this is for any property that you have. The more information you have about it, the better it is. And you also might want to look into where you can live. If you decide to sell your house, where are you going to go? Where do you think you might want to live? Do you want to stay in the area? Do you want your kids to go to a different school? These are things you want to think about. So when it comes to selling your house or keeping the house, what's going to be the best plan for you? So there are many options when it comes to the marital home. There's sell the house and split the proceeds. This is only obviously if you own your marital home. And this is if neither party wants to keep the home. You would pay off what's left on the mortgage, and then you would split the proceeds after the lawyers are paid, after the brokers are paid, and then you would get to keep whatever is left. This is a very common situation. You get the most money out of it, and then you both go your separate ways. So a lot of times one spouse will keep the house, and this is where everybody's saying, oh, they get to keep the house. So the way that somebody gets to keep the house is one person needs to buy out the other person. So one person gets a mortgage for what's left on the house and buys out the other person's share. That's how it works, and that's how they get to keep the house. The other option, which I don't see that frequently, a little bit, but not that much, is co-ownership for a set period. Maybe if the children have a year and a half left of school, or letting them finish until they graduate or finish, middle school, that they will allow one spouse to stay in the house for that period of time. And then when that period is done, then they sell the house and they split the proceeds. So that's another way that maybe a person will stay in the house for a short time. The next option would be if the court decides that one person would stay in the house. So that would be based on factors like one spouse's financial situation, a custody arrangement, one person's contributions to the home, necessary upkeep. That is, could be based on many different things, and that's not a usual situation. So when you meet somebody who says, oh, I got to keep the home, that's usually one person buying the other one out. So that's how somebody gets to keep their house. The house usually is considered marital property, as it's usually purchased during the marriage. If it was purchased before marriage and owned by one spouse ahead of time, that's where you run into problems about separate property versus marital property. And I'm sure there's an entire webinar devoted to that issue. One of my huge issues that I really believe in is social media and divorce, and do not post online. I would actually say to take down any accounts that you might have. I believe this, and I don't think that you should text your other spouse anything other than you would text your boss. Honestly, I fully believe that all texts are fair game to use in custody and in court, and I use them all the time. I think they're great. And anything that you post online, I think, will be scrutinized in any court action. And I would be careful about anyone. I mean, I'm not saying that you should be like a celebrity and not let anybody take your photo, but you're in the midst of a divorce and you need to remember that. And it's important to think that people, I'm not saying everybody's watching you, but it could be considered that way. I just don't think that posting something on social media and tagging yourself doing things that are considered inappropriate are a good idea. The best thing that ever happened for me personally was I had a child support case, and the father said he wasn't working, he'd been out of a job, and on the way to the hearing, he posted a picture of himself. Look at my new suit for my job, my new job that I got. I mean, it was like the best day. I mean, it was, when we get to court and I haven't had a job in months and blah, blah, and there was the picture of him on Facebook, all dressed in a suit at his new job. So it's a little bit hard to claim that you don't have a job when you're posting things online about your fabulous new job and all the new clothes you're buying for your new job. So, just be careful about what you post online, where you post it, and the things that you post about yourself, and never, post about your spouse. It is wrong, and it could get you into trouble, and it is, in my opinion, it's inappropriate, and I don't think it will help you in the end. I know that people like to go online and they like to complain about their spouses in all of these groups, and that's fine, but don't use your own name. And it can really get you into a lot of trouble. That is a very important thing to think about. And it can be used against you. And when you do text your spouse, remember that these texts can be used. And so be very, very careful about what you email and what you text. That is my last piece of advice. That's the most important piece I think that I can offer, is that I would be very careful and think that anything that you text or email will be seen by somebody else. And that would be the most important thing that I leave you with today.
I'm just gonna thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, and thank you again, Nancy, for presenting. Today's presentation was recorded and a copy will be sent to all attendees afterward. Thank you.
Thanks.